It's a thought that counts.
Okay, my name's Richard Seedhouse. I'm the clerk for the meeting this afternoon. The first order of business is for the licensing subcommittee members to nominate and then second a chair. Could I have a nomination for chair, please?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Councillor Williscroft, please.
And is that seconded?
I second that.
That's super. And Councillor Williscroft, do you accept the nomination?
I certainly do, Richard.
Okay, over to you, sir.
Welcome to the meeting, everybody. My name's Councillor Williscroft. I'd like to introduce Councillor Caroline Charles and Councillor Samantha MacArthur, the two other members of the subcommittee. I'll ask others to present and introduce themselves when they speak later on. So, formalities. Given notice that the hearing is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, please be aware that as the meeting is being held virtually, there may be a slight delay. Participants will be muted when they are not speaking to reduce background noise. At any time, if anyone experiences technical difficulties, they should let the clerk know, which is Richard. In the event any party to the hearing loses connection and is no longer present in the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting immediately for a few minutes whilst we resolve the issue. In the event the issues cannot be resolved, the meeting will be rescheduled for another date as soon as practicable. I'd now like to ask if there are any declarations of interest from the councillors or apologies for absence. Councillors, any declarations of interest?
No declarations and no apologies, Chair.
No apologies. Okay, moving on. Thanks for that. I'd like to inform all parties that the subcommittee will follow the hearing procedures, a copy of which was included in the notice pack sent to all parties. If anyone has not received the papers, please speak now. Okay, I'll take that you've all received the notice packs. Now, I'd like to ask the legal advisor to inform those present that the subcommittee had a briefing prior to the hearing to confirm the procedure and for clarification on any aspect of the application.
Yes, the licensing subcommittee meets before the meeting just to read through and consider the papers. No legal advice is given in such meetings, and obviously that will happen whether in deliberations or during the course of this meeting.
Thank you, Guy. Moving on, I'd like to ask the licensing officer present if there are any technical issues they feel should be brought to the panel's attention.
Thank you, Chair. Tony Hawks, I'm the licensing officer for the hearing today. Just to mention for your records, I've got David Ryan, one of my colleagues, with me here today as well. Only really one issue that I would describe as a technical point to raise with you, and that's with regards to the hours being applied for. As you will have seen, Chair, the application is relatively straightforward. It's an application for alcohol sales only for consumption off the premises. The original hours applied for in the first application have been amended. There's been some further papers submitted to you that you will have seen, and there's a slight discrepancy in some of those hours. So the hours that I'm going to recommend you take as being applied for are 7 AM to 9 PM Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 9 PM on Saturday, and 9 AM to 9 PM on Sunday. The starting hour on Saturday is the one that varies slightly to what's been put forward in the additional papers. It was put forward as 7 AM starting on Saturday, but in the original application, it was to start at 8 a.m. and we would not accept an amendment to an application to extend times that have been applied for and consulted on. So that's why I'm recommending you take the hours for Saturday as 8 a.m. But I'm sure the applicant will address you more fully on what they're applying for. They've got a range of conditions that they have put forward, which I know they want to address you on. Then other than that, you have the two representations that you will be aware of from Councillor Hick and from WERA. And the application is, of course, in the Council's cumulative impact policy area. Just to confirm to all parties present, that policy essentially means that an application is normally refused, but you're not obliged to refuse the application. You can grant an application and the discretion is yours to grant the application if you feel that the applicant has demonstrated to you they won't add to cumulative impact in the area.
Thank you, Tony. Is that it?
Yes.
Moving on, as I explained at the outset, the hearing and order of speakers will be following the procedures included in your agenda pack. We will start with the presentation by the applicant. So we're going to have the presentation by the applicant now. And the first, let's start with A, will be questions by interested parties to the applicant, followed by questions by the subcommittee to the applicant. So first of all, we're going to have questions by interested parties to the applicant.
Sorry, Chair. First up, you'll want to hear the presentation from the applicant.
Sorry.
And then follow that with questions.
Sorry. Okay, we'll have the presentation then.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me, and I apologise again for the slight technical issues that we had in joining the call, but we're all here. Just so that you're aware, I am in a room with Jess Fox. You can't see them, but please take my word for it. Jess Fox, who is a buyer at WH Smith, Mel Mahon, who is a senior project manager, Cassius Prince, who is a commercial project manager, and you can just see him to my right, is Keir Howlett. And Keir Howlett is a regional business manager for WH Smith, and I will explain a little bit more about that when we get to that point of my presentation. I have provided a short bundle of additional documents, which I know are on your website, and you've hopefully all had an opportunity of reading. And I've seen a response as well from Lynn Gordon on behalf of WERA. And there is also, as you've identified, a representation from Councillor Hicks. And can I get my apology in early to Councillor Hicks? I've referred to her as Councillor Wicks in my submission. So if you can accept my apology for that, that's a typo on my behalf. I'm not going to read out the submissions that I've sent through to you, but I'm going to follow the format that is set out in the submissions. And this is, as your officer has identified, as an application for a premises license for off sales only at WH Smith at their premises that sit just outside Wimbledon train station. And I can confirm the point that was made by your licensing officer insofar as sales of alcohol are concerned to start at 7 o'clock on Monday to Friday, 8 o'clock on Saturday, and 9 o'clock on Sunday, with the premises opening Monday to Friday at 6:30 in the morning. And those hours have been compromised as part of the application process and discussions and consultation that we've had with police. You will be familiar with WH Smith, and as customer demands have changed, so has the business, and the business has pivoted so that it has moved away from, I remember when I was much younger, is that it was a stationery store that I'd always go to just before the start of every term to buy my pens and pencils and protractors for going back to school. But the nature of the business, as customer demands have changed, so has the nature of the WH Smith business, and they operate in the country at 110 railway stations. and I've outlined in the submissions that some of the stations that they operate, and they're operating at some of the busiest train stations in England, Wales and Scotland. And more locally to you, they operate at a site in Twickenham, and their premises in Twickenham also have the benefit of and they have in excess of 40 premises licenses within their travel side of their business. You'll be familiar that WH Smith also have a high street presence, but within the travel side of their business, they have in excess of 40 stores that are licensed. And within those stores that are licensed, they sell a small range of alcohol. And I've provided at WH Smith, WHS2, the attachment to the submissions, a product list of the type and style of products that will be available within their premises. Now, not all of those products will be available, but a range of those products will be available. And what is apparent when you look at that is that all of those products are branded household names. They do not have own label products that you might see in supermarkets, which generally are sold at a lower price point. And so they are sold at for the nature of the products that they are, and they tend to be more expensive than perhaps the products that might be available in other off licenses close by. As you would expect with a business the size of WH Smith, they are well supported. Each store is well supported by head office operations, and that's set out at paragraph 10. And all stores are subject to monthly compliance visits, a range of matters, and one of which, where those stores are licensed, is compliance with their alcohol premises license. Sitting above a store manager is an area manager who will visit the premises monthly. You then have a regional business manager, and Mr. Howlett is the regional business manager. You then have a director of the south of operations, and the regional business manager reports into the director of the south, and then the director of the south in turn reports up to the board. And all stations or all WH Smith premises where they have units within train stations or in close proximity to train stations make sure that they have a close relationship, not only with the British Transport Police, but also with the station manager. And the store in Wimbledon is no different, notwithstanding the fact that they don't have an alcohol license, but they are a presence close by the station, and it is important that they maintain those close relationships and good relationships with the the station manager, and also British Transport Police. And as you would expect, and you will have seen from the submissions that I put in, is that there are extensive conditions about training, and we have modified the condition in relation to training so that is carried out on a 6-monthly rota, and that is something that was agreed with your trading standards officer. We were happy to agree with the trading standards officer. And there are also conditions in relation to CCTV. And you will be aware, if you visited WH Smith premises, is that they already sell a range of age-restricted products. And so they are familiar with the need to ask for age verification. Their stores that sell alcohol run a Challenge 25 process. And there are, in some premises, they may be selling cigarettes, they may be selling lottery, and there may be pharmaceutical products that all require age verification. And you will know from going shopping, and I know this, I haven't been asked my age for many, many years, but if you scan some alcohol through a till, even if it's a self-service till, that sale has to be verified by a member of staff. And in all of those premises that WH Smith operate where they sell alcohol, none of those stores have been subject to any regulatory enforcement action, and none of them have ever been subject to a license review. And all of that will hopefully give you as a committee confidence that this premise, if you're kind enough to grant it a license, firstly will not add to the cumulative impact within the locality, but also is unlikely to have an adverse impact on the licensing objectives. the site itself, and you will be familiar with this, it's just outside the train station. WH Smith have had a presence there for over 20 years. And when they go through a process of identifying sites, not all sites that those who feel that it may be appropriate to put alcohol into a site are ultimately chosen, because that's a decision that is taken by the regional business manager. And when they make that assessment, they look at a variety of different factors. And one is security, one is safety, and one important factor is that in particular is the safety of their staff. But the application for this site was signed off by the regional business manager. And you will have seen, and I know that WERA have provided a map of other off-license premises within the locality. And what stood out to me is that actually the hours that are being applied for here are more restricted than that which has been granted elsewhere. So there are other premises that are selling alcohol earlier than that which we've applied for. And there are a number of stores that are selling alcohol later than that which we have applied for. And there are some stores that have the ability to sell alcohol 24 hours a day. So we are not applying for anything that has not been granted before by you as a committee. Now, in advance of submitting the application, as is the case with all of the applications, we carried out pre-application consultation. And then during the consultation period, we had significant discussions with the police. We also had discussions with the trading standards officer, so that the training is now changed to a 6-month rotation. But as a consequence of all of those discussions, a significant schedule of conditions has been proposed with this application, and it amounts to more than 30 conditions. And there has also been in hours, and I'm going to look at some of the conditions in a moment. But I'm not going to shirk the issue that has been raised by the officer earlier in relation to the cumulative impact area. And we are aware of and sensitive to the fact that these premises do sit within the cumulative impact area. But can I just take you to a couple of things that I have said in my submissions. And the first is this, and this appears at paragraph 26 of the submission. And that says, and you'll excuse me for reading this out, the CIA does not change the fundamental way that licensing decisions are made. It is therefore open to the licensing authority to grant an application where it considers it is appropriate and where the applicant can demonstrate in the operating schedule that they would not be adding to the cumulative impact. And then, although this doesn't appear in the submissions, if you look at the national guidance, the section 182 guidance, which your legal advisor will be aware of, and at paragraph 14.28, it says, the publication of the CIA would not remove the licensing authority's discretion to grant new licenses where the authority considers this to be appropriate in light of the individual circumstances of the case. And so the existence of the CIA, you look at the individual merits of this particular application in light of the conditions that we have offered. And then the second point, I'm going to just make 5 very quick points about your CIA. The second point is that your CIA recognises quite rightly that not all licensed premises have the same impact on a locality, and that appears at page 38 of your policy. And it says the authority recognises that the impact of premises can be different for premises with different styles and characteristics. So, for example, large nightclubs or late night bars and public houses might add to the problems of cumulative impact. A small restaurant or theatre may not. And the third point I would make in relation to your CIA, and I know that it's a comment that WERA have responded to, is that within Merton, you also have a CIA in Mitcham Town Centre, and that specifically references off-sales premises in a way that the CIA for the Wimbledon Town Centre does not. The fourth point I'd make about CIAs is that WH Smith, and this is contained within the submissions that I have sent in, and that's at paragraph 29, they already operate in other cumulative impact areas. And you may say, well, it's an application within Wimbledon, but you can take an inference from that, is that where they have been granted licenses in other CIAs, and those CIAs, I can tell you, have been born out of similar concerns and issues that have been raised within your own CIA, they have not added to the cumulative impact in those specific areas. They have not threatened the licensing objectives, and those licenses are not the subject of any regulatory enforcement action or indeed a license review. So they have not had an adverse impact on the locality in where they are based. And then the final point, insofar as your cumulative impact policy is concerned, is the role of the responsible authorities. And this, in our submission or my submission, is central to the decision-making process that you have to undertake in relation to this application. And it's set out at paragraph 30 of my submissions. And whilst the local authority is the guardian of the CIA, the principal sponsors, if I can put it like that, are the police, because I have had a look at the basis on which your CIA has been introduced, and the evidence in relation to the CIA is provided by the police and relates to principally crime statistics and antisocial behaviour, which is the domain of the police. And the point, the most significant point in this is that it would have been open, and this is at paragraph 30 of the submissions, it would have been open to any of the responsible authorities, and in particular the licensing authority as a responsible authority, and the police as the primary sponsor of the CIA, the British Transport Police, Environmental Health, Merton Local Safeguarding, and Public Health, to make a representation to the application in support of and citing the existence of the CIA. And I know that they have, I know that some of the responsible authorities in other applications that you receive, they do make representations in relation to the CIA, but the fact that they have not is significant. And our position is that it is not unreasonable for you to conclude that as none of the responsible authorities, and in particular the police or the licensing authority in their role as a responsible authority, have made a representation, is that these premises or the grant of this license is not going to add to the cumulative impact in this area. Because if they did have that concern, then it strikes me that they would have lodged a representation. And I've just seen that Mr. Hans,
Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Bishop, sorry, I was going to say Mr. Bishop has got his hand.
Mr. Bishop, licensing legal advisor to the subcommittee. Whilst the responsible authorities haven't put in a representation, that doesn't mean that the committee isn't still required to consider the cumulative impact policy. It's fair to say that the committee have to, because it is, the premises is where it is. But I'm not saying it's very helpful to your presentation.
The committee, of course, have to consider the CIA, and I'm not saying for one second that they shouldn't consider the CIA, but the point I'm making is that the CIA, which is promoted or sponsored, I use that word sponsored, by the police, because the concerns in the CIA relate principally to crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. They have not made a representation to the application. And my suggestion to you, or my submission to you, is that you can draw an inference from the fact that they have not made a representation citing the CIA.
I'll advise the committee in deliberations on that.
Thank you. Insofar as the operating schedule is concerned, that appears at pages 28 to 32 of your report. And I'm not going to take you through that step by step, but it is on any assessment a comprehensive schedule of conditions. And at paragraph 35 of the submission that we have put in, there are a number of conditions that relate to the sale of alcohol. And I shall just deal with those slowly in turn. Firstly is that no more than 10% of the shop floor area is to be used for the display of alcohol. So it will be a small area within the premises that will be used for alcohol and probably limited to one chiller. Save for spirit mixers, any spirits will only be displayed for sale from behind the servery counter. Save for gift packs, no alcohol should be sold from the premises in less than or equal to 5 centilitre measures or bottles. And these are all conditions that were suggested by suggested by the police and agreed to by ourselves. And that there will be prominent signage indicating the permitted hours for the display of alcohol so as to be visible before entering the premises where alcohol is on public display and at the point of sale, and that alcohol should not be sold in an open container or be consumed in the licensed premises. As you would expect, there is an age verification policy, and an age verification policy is already in place in relation to the other age restricted products that the premises sell. And this appears at paragraph 36 of the submissions that I have put into you. And I've already explained to you that there is an automatic till prompt to our staff for age verification identification when presented with an alcohol sale. And that is regardless of whether it's a self-service sale, as we might all have done in other off-licensed premises or supermarkets, and also where you're making a purchase over the counter. And there are also a series of additional conditions which WH Smith were happy to agree at the request of the police, and these appear at paragraph 37 of the submissions that I've sent to you. And I'm going to read through those in turn just for the benefit of the record. The first is that the premises license holder will become part of any community safety initiatives coordinated by the police and or the licensing authority insofar as they relate to the 4 licensing objectives. The premises license holder will display prominent notices on the premises reminding customers of any public spaces protection orders that relates to no public drinking enforced, preventing alcohol being consumed in an antisocial manner. Staff will routinely check the premises and area outside the immediate front of the premises during the opening hours to ensure that the premises are clean and tidy, and that the premises license holder shall ensure that any persons highlighted by the police as a street drinker is barred from the premises and shall not be sold alcohol. During the course of the consultation, we received representations from Councillor Hicks and also from Wera. I think Councillor Hicks's principal or primary concern is set out in her representation related to hours, and those hours have been compromised following discussions that we have had with the police. And we also sent a response to Wera, and that appears at WHS 6 in the submissions that we provided. And although this hasn't been taken up by Wera, if the application is granted, then WH Smith is, of course, willing to continue to engage with the Residents Association and has offered to provide a contact number for their premises in Wimbledon to the Residents Association. And we are more than happy to add that on as a condition to the licence. And that appears at paragraph 48 of the submissions that we've provided to you. And I am coming to the end, which you will be no doubt relieved to hear. But can I just go back to a point I made earlier about the CIA and the position of the responsible authorities, because it is important and it is key to your decision-making process today. We have engaged fully with all of the responsible authorities. And a number of conditions, as I have said, have been agreed with the responsible authorities, in particular the police and to a lesser extent the Trading Standards Officer. But your attention is drawn in particular to paragraph 9.12 of section 182 of the National Guidance. And this appears at paragraph 39 of the submissions that I've sent in. And what it says is that each responsible authority will be an expert in their respective field. And in some cases, it is likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. So, for example, the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy and should have good working relationships with those operating in their local area. Police should usually therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of crime and disorder licensing objective. And as I've said already, they, following discussions with them, have taken the view that they are not going to object to this application. Had they any concern that this application was going to add to the cumulative impact in this locality, or they had any concern that the grant of the license was likely to undermine the licensing objectives, then it is fair to assume that they would have objected to this application, and they have not. And that's not to, I don't want to belittle the contribution of Councillor Hicks and also the local residents association, but when you look at the issues of crime and disorder and perhaps some of the other issues that the residents association have raised, that is unsupported by the view of those who have primary responsibility for crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour within Wimbledon. And that is all I've got to say at the moment. I now have an opportunity, I think, at the end to sum up. But the consideration for you is, will this application at these premises add to the cumulative impact or be likely to undermine the licensing objectives? And on the basis of what we have provided to you, the conditions that we have offered to you as a committee, the agreement that we have reached with the trading standards and the agreement that we've reached with the police, the comprehensive schedule of conditions, and WH Smith's standing as a reputable operator of licensed premises across the country with no adverse impact on the licensing objectives or indeed on cumulative impact areas where they do operate within those cumulative impact areas, then I would invite you to grant this application.
Okay, thank you very much for that concise presentation. You can all hear me, can't you? Yeah, I'd like to now move on, and first on the agenda is questions by interested parties to the applicant. Questions by interested parties to the applicant. Are there any questions by the interested parties?
Yes, I have a few questions, if I may.
Do you want to go first, Susie?
Sure. Forgive me, I didn't catch your name right at the beginning. Is what's envisaged that one member of staff will be present at the shop all the time and they will be visited every 6 months? Is that the basic breakdown?
No, it's not. That there may be occasions, and this is something that Keir, sorry, my name's Ewan McGregor. I think we exchanged emails.
Thank you. Yeah, we've emailed. Yes, yes, the Scottish connection.
Yes. You've rather threw me that.
Sorry.
No. It is not the intention that these premises will be single manned and be visited once every 6 months by a regional manager. There may be, as is the case with some WH Smith premises across the country, occasions where the premises may be single manned, but that is a matter in terms of management for the area manager and the regional manager. and at busier times of the day, then it will be dual manned. But it's not going to be, for the totality of the operating hours, it is not single manned. And appropriate levels of staffing, subject to risk assessments that WH Smith carry out, will be on duty. The area manager will visit the premises at least once a month.
Oh, yes. My apologies. Yes,
um,
you did say that.
And then the regional business manager, which is Mr. Howlett, and you'll appreciate, because it's a region, it's a slightly larger area, will make it his duty to visit the premises twice a year. Now, if you have a premise that is a problem, and that's regardless of whether it is selling alcohol or not selling alcohol, and there are specific issues, then those visits would happen on a more regular basis. And they can track through all the systems that they've got, the sales that they do, and the processes and systems that sit behind the store, is that they can identify those issues early, and then there will be more regular visits than the monthly visits or the 6 monthly visits.
I'm just thinking that during the quiet parts of the day, when from the sound of it, it will be single manned, your member of staff isn't going to have any opportunity to pop outside to see whether the local heavy drinkers are sitting on the benches outside. He's not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, sorry, hello, it's Keir.
Hello.
Given this is not one of our busiest trading units, so during the quiet periods where we may be single manned, the staff will be in and around the store and actually have good visibility at the front of the store and what's going on outside in the environment. And in fairness, we do that anyway from a due diligence perspective, just so we're sort of aware of our surroundings. But I wouldn't perceive it as a risk.
Okay. The other thing, a couple of other things. WH Smith, I remember WH Smith from when I used to go to school too, a long time ago. But this business of having pivoted your business offering, how recent is that? How long have you been adding off sales of alcohol into your business offering?
The process started in 2012.
Right.
So the first license application was made in 2012.
Right.
And over a course of years, is that number has, so that's what, 11 years ago, and they now operate 40 licensed units across the country.
Sure, no, I understand that. Wimbledon's fairly unique in that the station has the piazza, has all the drink outlets around, and has probably thousands of school children passing through it every day. To what extent are your other cumulative impact areas, stores that you've been talking about, how many of those share those characteristics? Or are they more typically big stations?
I think in any train station is that you're going to have a significant number of children coming to and from or passing through the premises during the course of a day, and whether it's within London or it's outside of London. And within London, we've got also with tube stations and also with mainline stations as well. The totality of the list of premises, I've listed 3 on my submissions that we've given you, is that I know that certainly within Westminster, within Leeds, and at Newcastle, which central stations, those will be stations that will be frequented on a regular basis by children and by a wide variety of people across the spectrum. But it's not just limited to those premises that are within CIAs. All of their stations will have that same through flow of people.
But from the sound of it, I mean, Wimbledon has so many schools. I mean, it's a big transport hub, even though it's a little station, and it has so many school children passing through it. I think it must be unique. Is it you just treating it as if it's the same as anywhere else?
That's perhaps a question that's better answered by Keir.
Yeah, I think when we look at the type of products we sell in that location, it's very much, you know, a snacking pickup location. That's not dissimilar to what we see in many of our other locations. So as a comparable, we've got alcohol in Norwich Rail. And actually the mix of what we sell is very similar. And actually, because of where that station is, and the stores that we've got postal areas, we get an awful lot of children come through there as well. And there's other retailers too that will also sell alcohol, not dissimilar to what you see in Wimbledon.
Yeah. The other thing I think I would probably like to ask, or two more things, sorry, and then I'll stop. Traditionally, WH Smith has been very attractive to children. And I think that's probably, even though your offering has changed, still very much the case. Is that fair?
It would certainly attract them to a certain degree, but if I take Wimbledon, for example, if I look at the sales makeup, almost 25% of those come from the tobacco products at the moment. So I'd suggest the mix is probably somewhat different to what it was once upon a time.
Right. Okay. And the last thing is, I understand that WH Smith are shifting their offering and that it's a hostile world. And this is not a particularly busy store. If the addition of the off license doesn't transform the business in that particular little shop, is there any consideration, has there been any discussion about a plan B, like selling it on in the foreseeable future?
No. If you have a store where you put in a product and it's not selling, and because space is limited, is that you would withdraw that product and you would put something else in.
Right.
And so if the sale of alcohol at this premise is not successful, then unless someone tells me otherwise, Keir is nodding, is that the alcohol would be withdrawn from sale. And there have been occasions with other WH Smith stores where they have obtained premises licenses and it has not worked, where the license has been surrendered.
So basically what you're telling me is that the alcohol license, the off sales license, is not key to the survival of this business.
It is
If
part
it doesn't
of,
work, you'll stop selling it, but you'll still be there.
yes, yeah. We're not going to move the business. If you're concerned, and it may be something that Lynn Gordon raised, is that I think she said in her letter, and I apologise if I'm paraphrasing this.
Don't worry.
WH Smith is fine, and it's a good company, and it's got all the backup and the back of house operations. But what happens when you come to sell it, or you decide to move on? WH Smith have no plans to move this store on.
Fine. Thank you.
And if they did, there is a process through which any license would have to be transferred, and at that stage, the police again would have an opportunity to object to that application.
So my very last question, who is the named license holder going to be? Is it going to be the person who runs the shop, or is it going to be somebody who's not present? How's it going to work?
The application, if the license is granted, an application will be made to add a DPS onto the license, so the designated premises supervisor, and they will be the manager of the store, and they will be a personal license holder, and they will work a full shift at the store, supported by other members of staff. So they are not a remote, somebody who's not connected to the. It won't be Mr. Howlett, for example.
That's fine. Thank you very much. That's reassuring. Thank you. Lynn?
Thank you. Thanks, Susie. Could I just ask you, you say that WH Smith have been trading there for more than 20, I think probably more than 30 years. When does the lease actually expire?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and would it automatically be re-awarded to you, or do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
All right. Okay. And could I also ask, would a staff member always be situated at the till during the hours you're selling alcohol or not? Currently at the moment, when you pop into WH Smith, there's often not a member of staff present. They come from out the back or whatever, but it's often quite empty when you go in.
Okay, so the staff member will always be present in the store. My understanding is staff member would 99% of the time be on that shop floor. The only time where you might have to do something different is to usually access a printer, which is sort of a metre off the shop floor, in fairness.
Yeah.
So someone can be certainly very visible.
In practice, though, you can often go in and no one's actually on the shop floor.
Okay, I can address that, to be fair, because I don't think that's familiar with what we would normally do.
Yeah, and you know, sort of your own, you will have the open part of the alcohol offering as well, won't you? Obviously, the spirits will be behind glass, etc. But beer, etc., you can just take off the shelves. Yeah. And just finally, what's the net internal retail floor space?
I don't know the answer to that, but if we can find that
Sorry.
out, if I can let you know.
That'd be lovely, thank you. And that's it from me, thank you.
No.
Are there any further questions by interested parties to the applicant?
Just one, forgive me. Based on what Lynn has just established, which I didn't previously understand, what kinds of alcohol are going to be not behind glass? What's going to be available to somebody to pick up or possibly shoplift?
The only alcohol that is behind, and this is their standard practice, is that any bottles of spirits are kept behind the counter. And then the remainder of their offer is on the shop floor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if there are no further questions by interested parties to the applicant, can we move on to questions by the subcommittee to the applicant, if that's all right? Yeah, Caroline Charles, councillor.
Yes, hello, Mr. McGregor. Thank you for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions to ask, well, 2 or 3 questions to ask, and some observations to make. The first question I wanted to ask, you're saying that the alcohol's going to be in two different places in the store, one behind the counter and obviously another in the fridge. Now, I've been in the store and the visibility of the actual fridge isn't great from where the counter is. So I'm thinking, if there's only one person in the shop, if people are hovering about by the wine and the beer chiller, then they're going to have to leave the place where the spirits are, and also the cigarettes as well. So the first thing I wanted to know was, will the spirits actually have security tags around them? And the second thing is, obviously they're both quite addictive substances. So if there's only one person in the shop, and people who really want cigarettes or alcohol might see it as easy pickings, as it were, if there's just one guy in there. And the other thing was about the actual visibility of the benches where the street drinkers may be, because where the counter is, if you look out of the window there is the flower stall, and they do tend to really spread out across the pavement there. So I'm not sure that whoever's behind the counter will be able to see what's going on outside that easily. The other thing I wanted to know was, will you be selling white cider and super strength lagers as well? Because that would be another attraction to a lot of those people that are outside. And the final thing really was about the storeroom. Now, you've got the storeroom to the side of the counter, and I was just wondering, how secure is that going to be at all times, really? Is it locked? Is it well protected? Basically those are my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Charles, you've asked a number of questions. I'm gonna, if I miss any of them, I'm not trying to avoid them. It's because I've been trying to write them down as you've gone along. So,
All right,
so
sorry, yeah.
if I do miss anything, then please remind me,
Yes.
because it's not through wanting to avoid answering them. The first is in relation to super strength lagers and the sort of 1 litre bottles of I think it used to be called White Lightning, or the super strength ciders. WH Smith do not sell those sorts of products, and we have offered a condition elsewhere.
7%.
Oh. So we have offered a condition elsewhere that we would not sell those products. So products in, I think it's 1 litre asked for by another authority, not a million miles away from where you are at the moment. And we would happily offer that condition again to you as a committee, if that gives you comfort. In relation to ABVs on beers, lagers and ciders, the police requested a specific condition in relation to that, and that condition has been offered and can be found at paragraph 12 of the submissions that we have provided to you. Insofar as visibility of the chiller is concerned, and the plan which appears at it is in your report, and I'm trying to find which page the plan is on. If you look at, it's at page 27 of the report, and the proposed location of the alcohol is directly opposite the tills. So there is good visibility. The tills will be covered by CCTV. The alcohol area is covered by CCTV, and the entrance and exit to the premises is covered by CCTV as well. I think those are the questions that I can answer. I think there were a couple of questions that is perhaps easier for Keir to answer, but can I just make this absolutely clear? It is that WH Smith want to ensure that when they display any product, they're the victim of a crime if anything gets stolen. So it's not in their interests to display alcohol or indeed any product within the premises in a way that puts their business at risk and indeed puts other people at risk. And so they need to make sure that however they lay the store out, is that it is done in as safe and as sensible a way as possible. And their experience, and Mr. Howlett will confirm this, so you get it from the horse's mouth, is that putting alcohol into their premises does not have an adverse impact on the losses that stores may well suffer as a retail outlet. And indeed all retail outlets have. And I think the final point that I can answer from the questions that you've asked, and apologies for if I've forgotten any, Keir will hopefully pick these up, is that bottles of spirits would be sold from behind the counter and have security tags on them as well.
Yeah, correct. What I would do is just if I just talk about loss, then I can talk about the business. So when businesses where we've put alcohol into in the past, that is not a key area of loss to us. Confectionery, consumer electronics, of which this store sells both, have always been a higher level of loss for us than we've seen in alcohol. And to context from a Wimbledon perspective, to date, that sits in the bottom 10% stores that currently experience loss. So the nature of the people we have coming into that store and the levels of loss we have from the key categories that we lose across the estate is proportionately low in that location. So I wouldn't perceive a significant increase in risk as a result of putting alcohol in there.
Okay. I believe Samantha's got a hand up. Samantha?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I've got a couple of questions, and they are along similar lines to what other people have raised, and that is the issue of groups of school children coming in to the store and how you will deal with that. You also say you're going to ban from the premises street drinkers. Now, if you've only got one member of staff on, or at the most two, how are you going to deal with groups of children coming in or street drinkers coming in if they're trying to serve and deal with groups? And I know other stores in Wimbledon, for example, have security and they only let so many children in at a time, school children, because as has been mentioned before, the numbers of school children coming into that area are huge. And whilst I'm sure you have other stores where school children go through, I find it hard. It's very difficult to explain how many children there are and the massive groups that gather. And I just don't know how, if you only have one member of staff on, you'll be able to deal with the children coming in and just taking things, and that would have an impact. The second question is, I just was interested to know what percentage of the stores where you've already rolled out alcohol in this way, how much of the alcohol sales make up the business that is done. And thirdly, I know you've used the fact that the police and nobody has objected as a reason that for us to consider that you're not going to add to the cumulative impact, but can you give any other reasons yourself, not just a negative reason, but actual, we won't add cumulative impact because, please? Thank you.
In relation to children, at busy times, and Keir made the point earlier, is that when the store is busy, they will have more staff on, and you flex your staffing depending on how busy you're going to be during the course of a day. Secondly, children do come into the store, and in relation to age verification, they already have policies in place in relation to age verification. It is something that the staff are used to doing. It is something that the staff will continue to do. They deal with it with cigarettes and they deal with it with alcohol. The percentage of losses at the store is very low, and you've heard that it's in the bottom of the estate. And when you talk about losses, that is split across three things. So there may be stock that isn't delivered, stock that doesn't get onto the shop floor, and then that stock that may go missing from the shop floor. So it is over three different areas when you talk about losses. So it's not just about things that may be stolen, but that is not having stock going missing is not in WH Smith's interest for obvious reasons, regardless of whether it is alcohol or it is chocolate or it is electronic goods. They do their absolute utmost to ensure that all of their stock is preserved, because they don't want to be the victims of crime, as I say, for an obvious reason. If you look at the percentage of sales, it is where alcohol is sold in their premises across their estate. The average spend per head on alcohol by customers as a totality is less than £1. So you're not talking about large volumes of alcohol being sold, but it is an important part of the offer, and that is why they have moved into convenience and not just, as Councillor Hicks and I may remember them as being stationary stores. I'm hoping that answers all the questions that you've asked. And if it doesn't, then please tell me, because I wouldn't want you to feel that I haven't answered the questions that you've asked.
No, the final one was just about the cumulative impact zone, because you do have to show us why there won't be a cumulative impact. Is there? I know that you have said the police and other people haven't objected, and is that what you're relying on? That's the reason why we should accept it, or that's what that was my last question. Right.
Well, there are a number of reasons why you have to look at when you look at your cumulative impact policy, you've got to look at why it is there. and I had a look at your cumulative impact policy. And the basis of your cumulative impact policy is in relation to crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour. And those sit behind the policy that I have been able to access, certainly on your website. And if you look at, am I right in thinking that these premises sit within Hillside Ward, which I think is the ward that Councillor Hicks represents? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I believe that is correct. Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you. So firstly, we do rely on the fact that there are no objections from the police. Insofar as children are concerned, there are no objections to this application from the local safeguarding body, who you as an authority take advice on in relation to the safety of children. If either of those bodies, or indeed Trading Standards, or indeed the British Transport Police, or the station manager at this station, had any concern that these premises were going to add to the cumulative impact in the area, it is safe to say that those bodies would have made a representation to this application. We operate in other areas where there is cumulative impact policies, and we have not, where we have had licenses granted, and we have not had, we have not added to the cumulative impact in those areas. We have not been subject to a license review. We are not a drain on regulatory enforcement bodies in local authorities where we have premises licenses. The amount of alcohol that we are selling is small in volume. It accounts for about 4% of the baskets that people, when people come in and shop. The quantities of alcohol that is being sold is low. The products that we are selling are branded. We are not selling high volume ABV products at low prices, as one might be able to find premises within Wimbledon itself. And so there are a number of reasons on which we believe that there is an exemption or an exception to the cumulative impact policy.
Okay. So I've got a couple of questions, Mr. McGregor, if that's all right. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. My first one is to do with a possible street drinking condition that you might like to add, which I don't believe is in the conditions at the moment. It would be something like, let's say, would you be prepared to put in a condition that said the shop can sell only a maximum of 4 cans or bottles per person before noon on weekends? Shall I repeat that? Would you be prepared to have a condition in there that the shop can sell a maximum of 4 cans or bottles per person before noon on weekends? And I suppose my next thing is, if not, why not?
I'm just getting instructions. I've got people busy scribbling away next to me. So if you want to, I don't know if you have another question.
Yeah, I do have one more question. So it may be a bit cheeky, I don't know, but you have a larger W.H. Smith in the centre court. So why not? Why are you not applying to sell alcohol in the larger shop with more space, where you could make more money? Or is this something that's coming down the tracks at a later date?
The travel side of WH Smith, they're two separate parts of the business. There's the travel business, and those naturally those premises sit within travel hubs, so airports, train stations, bus stations, and then there is the high street side of the business, and the travel, the high street side of the business has not rolled out concepts of alcohol licensing, whereas the travel side of the business has, and so it is, I think, unlikely that an application for a premises license for your WH Smith in Wimbledon will be made. They have made a number of, as I say, WH Smith have made in relation to their travel hubs for premises of a similar size. Some of them are bigger, and some of them may be a little bit smaller, but it's just the way that the business has evolved.
Yeah.
And in relation to your condition, I'm going to have to speak to my clients, but we are talking about that. We'll continue to talk about that during the course of the rest of the presentation.
Perhaps if I can assist Councillor on that one, I'm assuming what you're meaning is that your concern about street drinkers outside leads you to the idea, the question or thought that there may be an issue with single can sales, and that's really what you're interested in.
So you're talking to me, Guy?
Yes.
Yes, yes, I am. Yes,
Yeah.
Much interest in that. So yeah.
I mean, street drinkers obviously aren't going to go away after 12. So I would suggest if that was the sort of condition that was being discussed, it would be something that would be over the day if that was necessary. But maybe the applicant can explain why they think it's not, or whether they're happy to do it.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm not avoiding the question, Councillor Willis-Croft, but I will come back to you on that. But I need to get instructions on that. But I promise you that I will answer your question before we all finish this call.
Okay, no problem. So, are there any more questions before we move on? Are there any more questions by the subcommittee to the applicant? No, no more. So, okay, so I think we'll move on now, and we will have the presentation by the interested parties, who will take in agenda order. So we'll have the presentation by the interested parties who will take in agenda order. So it'll be questions by the applicant, or no, the presentation first. Okay, sorry. Presentation by the interested parties.
So I think first up, if you're content with an order, may I suggest Councillor Hicks followed by Wera.
Yeah.
If both Councillor Hicks and Wera are happy with that order.
I'm perfectly happy with that. I sort of had a feeling you were going to say that. I'm left at the end of this with the feeling that WH Smith can't demonstrate that there will be no cumulative impact. They don't seem to me to accept that this is a very unusual situation, the sheer volume of children and the presence of street drinkers who already congregate in the area. It doesn't seem to me to be being fully addressed, given the size of this shop and the fact that it's normally manned by one person. In the experience of Lynn Gordon, for example, I have to say me too. The prospect of there being two people, given that it's a relatively quiet shop, is probably a working maximum. I didn't get the opportunity, I should have asked that, but it came up subsequently. But the impression I have is that the most staff that are going to be there at a busy time is probably two, given the size of the store. And against that, I'm just not totally convinced, and it is for WH Smith to demonstrate this. The idea that the amount of alcohol well, on the one hand, the amount of alcohol they sell, 4% of the basket, not that important. And from their perspective, we are assured it's not going to impact their business situation. So if they don't get the license, they're not going to go away. They're just not going to be selling alcohol. The other thing which struck me in answer to a late question was that the quantities of alcohol they sell are low, person by person. So individuals are buying a can. And that's not a terribly attractive prospect, because it makes me think of street drinkers, and it makes me think of young people. And I think everybody on the committee will be familiar with the heaving groups that congregate around central Wimbledon and Hillside at certain times of the day. And I really feel that there is so much alcohol for sale all around. This is not necessary. It's not going to add anything. There's a real danger it is going to add to the cumulative impact. And I'm afraid, despite that very excellent persuasion and the enormous amount of detail we've been provided with, I remain concerned. So can I leave it at that? Thank you.
Okay. So, Wera going to come in now with questions?
You might like to invite questions from the applicant to each one after they've spoken, Chair.
Sorry, yeah, apologies, yeah, that's correct. So, further questions?
Sorry, does the applicant have any questions?
So I was trying to get myself off mute. I have no questions.
Okay. So,
Councillors, any questions?
no, not for me. Not for me.
Okay. Councillor MacArthur.
Hi, I just wanted to ask Councillor Hicks, are there any conditions that could be attached that aren't currently attached that would make her less concerned?
Sadly, I don't think there are, because the problem that I see is things happening which WH Smith are not equipped to deal with because they don't anticipate them. About the only thing which would give me comfort would be a very restricted license, which started late in the day when the school children have gone and ran into the evening. Although the new offering is 7 o'clock in the evening, I wouldn't have an objection to 9 o'clock in the evening. It seems to me that that is sort of adult drinkers going to dinner parties. That's different. What I'm concerned about is this starting early in the morning and being available at times of the day when there will be throngs and throngs of school children, as well as probably some of the people who hang out in that area and drink all day. So there aren't conditions that I can think of that will adequately meet those concerns, apart from simply restricting the hours. And if the hours were significantly restricted, then I think I would be much reassured. I don't really understand the need for this, given that it is said to be 4% of the basket. It's a very small, on the face of it, issue for WH Smith. So I don't really understand the need for it. But that's the one thing which I think would give me some comfort, would be shorter hours.
Sorry, I've got to step in here. The committee is not considering need or necessary.
Okay. So I think we're moving on to presentation by Wera now. I think that's right, isn't it, Richard? Yeah, presentation by Wera. If they'd like to step in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I have actually got a paper prepared, but I think we've discussed an awful lot of aspects of it in depth already. So I'm really just going to really give you the key highlights of it. In terms of the application itself, I'd say from a Wera point of view that we don't doubt really that WH Smith conducts its existing retail operations responsibly. I think the discussion has highlighted that they may have underestimated the requirements needed of introducing alcohol to the safely the Wimbledon Station branch. But our key problem with this license is that it is a license for the premises and not a license for people, and it will pass on to the next tenants of that retail establishment. And although, as Ewan pointed out, that will be in association with the licensing committee, at that point the residents will not have any input into it. So we are very concerned that if WH Smith leaves the premises, and it's a very volatile retail situation, that we don't know who it's passing on to, and that licensing does tend to operate when you're viewing it, not from a preventative point of view, but from a curative point of view, and we would have real concerns about that, particularly given the location, which again, just to emphasise, it is in the cumulative impact zone. It is quite a small area in terms of the station approach and everything else, but it is absolutely packed with children at certain times of day, and is very busy, and is very difficult actually to police. There's already 2 alcohol off sales outlets within about 30 metres of the WH Smith site. There's also a further 5 retail outlets, which are Marks, Tesco, Morrisons, Sainsbury's and Retail 4 within about another 100 metres. These are all on the map we provided. And then there's also a quite rapidly growing number of restaurants, hotels, bars, etc., who have been issued with licenses and will be applying for licenses in the future. So we are not without alcohol outlets, and we do not see how this cannot have an effect on the cumulative impact, and also increase, obviously, the potential for crime and disorder and public nuisance, harm to children and all of that. And particularly, I think, again, going back to the school children, that they will pass that. I know from the Safer Neighbourhood Panels Committee, they have a specific issue with children at the moment, with quite a lot of mobile phone, etc. So there is a lot of already crime within, offences, crime, whatever we want to call it, within the school children. And this is taking special monitoring by the police. Again, going back to just, the operation of the outlet itself, that it will need more staff, and particularly for that alcohol which isn't behind the glass screen. And really, in summary, I think for all those reasons, we are considered that the application can only add to the cumulative impact and cannot be set to promote the licensing objectives. Whilst we do, as we're support a changing business economy, residents and visitors, including all the children and school children passing through, must be safeguarded from the adverse impacts of antisocial behaviour and the increased risk of crime and disorder and public nuisance. And the grant of yet another off-sale licence in this already crowded area would act against that. And we just hope that our comments have been useful this afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity of being able to submit them.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. So I think we'll move on to questions by the applicant to interested parties. Mr. McGregor, questions by the applicant?
I have no questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on then to questions. Any questions by the subcommittee to the interested parties? Samantha's got a hand up. Samantha?
Thank you. I've just got the same question to you, Lynn. Thanks for the presentation. Are there any conditions that would allay your concerns in this regard? Any conditions that could be added to those already added that would make you feel happier, less concerned about the issues?
I think we just prefer it not to be. It is yet another outlet. It needs to be properly managed and almost policed, really, if it was going to go ahead. And we, we'd like it to be monitored of what's happening down there, both not with just with that, but with its wider impact on the total supply of alcohol around Wimbledon Station, because there are growing problems around there. There are often, there are problems throughout the whole of the station down to the piazza, etc. And it's a major problem on Friday, Saturday nights. And there is, and as I've said, there's an increasing problem that the police have identified with children during the day when they're coming out of school. They tend to behave themselves when they're going in.
Okay, so are there any further questions by the subcommittee to interested parties? No? Okay. I wonder, before you move on to asking the licensing officer for any comments, whether Mr. McGregor is able to answer my earlier question at this time, or you need more time?
I have an answer to your question, and we would be happy to offer a condition that there would be, I think, a maximum of 4 cans or bottles per transaction.
Yeah, before noon on weekends.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So moving on, I think I'm going to ask the licensing officer, Mr. Hawkes, for any comments or clarification. Tony?
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have anything else to add at this stage. I would normally remind you that there were written representations to consider as well, but both parties that have made representations have addressed you today. And there's been no proposed changes to the times applied for, other than those I highlighted earlier. And then there's been the conditions that have been discussed during the hearing.
Thank you very much, Tony. So I'm going to ask our legal advisor, Guy, for any comments or clarifications. Guy?
I've already addressed you on this.
Okay.
Obviously, there's been a lot of comments relating to need or it being another premises in the centre of town. Obviously, the cumulative impacts policy is designed to deal with that, but in terms of need, that's not what the committee is allowed to consider.
Okay, thank you.
I will
Guy.
address you further in deliberations on other law where required.
Thank you, Guy. So I think we'll move on now to closing statements by the interested parties, and we'll start with Councillor Hicks, if that's all right.
Thank you. I think all I can really say is thank you for all the detail, and I'm sorry to find myself saying, I don't think this is going to work. I think this is going to add to the problems the town centre already has. And I don't think the measures which are proposed can wholly address it. But I don't think there'll be enough staff. I think there'll be too many children. I think children are remarkably able when they're young in terms of acquiring alcohol. And I'm just sadly not convinced. But thank you for the opportunity to say so.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah. So I'll invite Wera to closing statements.
I think we've made our position perfectly clear. And obviously there are even more issues raised over staffing, etc. And the growth of public nuisance in general with all the alcohol outlets. I would ask as well specifically if the subcommittee intends to depart from the special policy, could we have a recent decision of why? Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
You have to have a decision each time with the reasons provided, so that will always be provided.
Thank you, that would be brilliant.
Thank you very much, Lynn. So I think now we'll move on to closing statement by the applicant, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you. There are a few points that need to be picked up. I didn't ask Lynn Gordon any questions, but I just want to pick up on a couple of things that she has said. She said she doesn't doubt the conduct of WH Smith as a retail operator, that they will operate responsibly. And there's no reason to believe or suggest that if you grant this license, these premises will not continue to operate sensibly and responsibly, and that the premises will be properly managed, and that they will be properly policed by members of staff if the license is granted. And you get that from the way the premises are operated at the present time, and that will continue, and the way that their premises operate elsewhere across the country. Insofar as children are concerned, there are a number of points that need to be made. That children go into all retail outlets, and it's the way that they are managed within the premises that really matters. And so we have a policy, a Challenge 25 policy, that is rolled out across our estate very successfully, and all members of staff are trained on that, and they ensure that children cannot and do not get sold alcohol. And you've also heard from Mr. Howlett is that the advent of alcohol into licensed premises does not increase the level of losses within these premises. And so far as children are concerned, and if I begin to sound like a stuck record, then I make no apologies for that. But I refer you back to paragraph 9.12 of the national guidance, and one of the responsible authorities that we engage with as part of this process is the Merton Local Safeguarding in their role of protection of children from harm. And they are your primary source of information when it comes to protecting children within the locality. And if they had a concern that this application by WH Smith was going to add to cumulative impact, or was going to put a strain on the licensing objectives, or was likely to result in the licensing objectives being breached, then it would have been open to them to have made an objection to the application, and they have not. And when Lynn Gordon says that there is an increasing problem with children that the police have identified, that has not been evident in any of the discussions that we have had with the licensing officer during the course of this application process. And all that WH Smith would like to do is to provide a small range of alcohol within their premises, as they do very successfully elsewhere and without issue within their premises to their customers. And the price point at which they are selling is significantly higher than their competitors. And if you look at a single product where they may be selling it at £3.99, it is available in Tesco at £1.69. So their price point, and they make no apology for that, is that that's where they position themselves in the market. Lynn Gordon said, well, the key problem is that the licenses for the premise and WH Smith may not be there forever. And those are all irrelevant considerations, because if you follow that argument through, you would never grant any licenses. But the truth of the matter is that WH Smith are not closing premises across the country, and they're perhaps bucking the trend in retail, and they are opening premises across the country. And we sort of find ourselves in a difficult position where if we say, well, there are only a small number of people that are buying alcohol and the spend per head in alcohol is low. Someone may say, as has been said, well, they'll still be there if you don't grant the license. If we'd said, of course, we're selling huge volumes of alcohol, then it would be open for somebody to say, well, they're selling huge volumes of alcohol, so they are going to add to the cumulative impact in the area. So we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. But we've been very open with you, is actually the alcohol provision within the store is it is a limited range. Not everybody is buying products. It is deliberately priced at a high price point, because that's where we set our market. And the experience elsewhere is that it does not add to the cumulative impact within the localities that we operate in. And there is no reason to believe that if we are granted a license here, that we will add to the cumulative impacts policy. So I'm going to take you to the summary of my submissions, which start at paragraph 49. This application by this applicant at these premises be likely to undermine the licensing objectives. And what section 182 of the Licensing Act says is that the authority's determination should be evidence-based, justified as being appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives and proportionate to what it is intended to achieve. And as the national guidance says, if the licensing authority decides that an application should be refused, it will still need to show that the grant of the application would undermine the promotion of one of the licensing objectives and that appropriate conditions would be ineffective in preventing the problems involved. We have offered a very broad and significant range of conditions and offered a further condition during the course of this application, which we believe are sufficient, appropriate to attend to not only the cumulative impact policy, but also to the upholding of the licensing objectives. And then the point I make at paragraph 52 is that the licensing committee can only really make such a finding based on admissible material submitted to it. And what the authority cannot be asked to do is speculate, as the High Court made clear, and there is a case there. It can draw inferences from the material that it does have. And that is why I spent some time at the start of this whole process setting out the background to WH Smith, the way that they approach their responsibilities as a retailer, the way that they approach their responsibilities as a retailer of alcohol, what their experience elsewhere is, and the lack of impact that they have had on cumulative impact areas, and or the lack of impact that they have had on regulatory enforcement across the country. And so you can be confident that these are people who are responsible operators. They're a competent operator, and they're also a mature operator when it comes to the sale of alcohol. And so I'm going to take you through some of the points that I have made in at paragraph 53. Firstly, and when you look at an exception to the CIA, you might have reached a different decision if you had a new entrant to the market, and I fully accept that. But what you need to do is look at this in the round, and what is the likelihood of there being an impact on your cumulative impact policy and or the licensing objectives. The first is that WH Smith is an experienced operator, and they're a competent operator of licensed premises. And I think that that is probably accepted by those, even those who oppose the application. They operate licensed outlets in some of the busiest travel hubs across the country. And those are travel hubs where there are children who are going to be present, as well as grown-ups. And when it comes to children, they have policies in place to ensure that the children are not sold alcohol in these premises. And insofar as street drinkers are concerned, the reality is that the price point of the products that WH Smith are selling is significantly higher than the price point of other operations in close locality. The premises sell a wide range of convenient products, and these premises will not be alcohol-led. None of the WH Smith licensed premises have ever been subject to regulatory enforcement action. None of the WH Smith licensed premises have ever been subject to a license review. They operate in other cumulative impact areas in other parts of the country, and in those areas they have operated without concern. And the application itself is supported by a comprehensive schedule of conditions, which have been supplemented by additional conditions proposed by the police, all of which have been accepted, and supplemented by a further condition offered during the course of this hearing. The area of display of alcohol within the premises is limited, so that no more than 10% of the shop can be given over to the sale of alcohol. The staffing and the security of the premises is of paramount importance to WH Smith, and they would not have chosen these premises to make an application if they thought that they were going to put their staff at risk. They are confident, because they do it elsewhere, that the premises can be operated, and the staffing levels are a matter for them, and they are risk assessed. And at busy times, there will be 2 members of staff on. There may be, on occasion, 3 members of staff on. And there may be occasion when, of course, there may be 1 member of staff on. But that is a matter for them and the way that they run their shop, because if they don't have enough members of staff on at any one time, then they want to make sure that those premises are secure, and that their products are secure, and that they themselves don't want to be victims of crime and theft and losses. It is of significance, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, that there are no representations to the application from any of the responsible authorities. And that is in particular the police and British Transport Police, the station manager, and I will add to that those that have responsibility for safeguarding within Merton, and the police being the primary sponsors of your CIA policy, have not made a representation to the application. And furthermore, the licensing authority, whose policy it is, and within your policy sits the CIA, and they have not made a representation to this application, and they could have done. Again, I would urge your licensing officer to look at paragraph 9.12 of the national guidance, with which he will be familiar. And finally, I would say this. If there was any merit in the concerns that are raised by those who make representations to this application, it is not unreasonable to assume that the police, the British Transport Police, the licensing authority, the safeguarding body within Merton would have made a representation to this application to support your CIA. And the fact that they have not is significant, and it's important, and I think is a reflection of the fact that those responsible authorities do not believe that the granting of this application will add to the cumulative impact in the area. And so, sir, and members of the committee, in all the circumstances, I would invite you to grant the licence to WH Smith for their premises. We are confident, because it's what we do elsewhere, that the concerns or fears that have been raised by Councillor Hicks and also by the Residents' Association will not be realised. If their concerns were realised, then you have obviously powers, and indeed as do the local residents, to bring this licence back before the committee. But you again can take confidence from the fact that that has never happened in the 11 years that WH Smith have been operating licensed premises at their travel outlets across the country. So I'd invite you to grant the application.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. Now, I can't see any hands up, so I think I'm writing and assuming no one has anything else to say.
No, closing a summary has been done, so therefore it's a matter of closing the meeting.
That's it, yeah. Thank you for that, guys. So just like I said, the subcommittee, we're about to retire to closed session, and I invite the legal advisor and clerk to join us to provide advice. Once I've closed the hearing, our clerk, Richard Seedhouse, will disconnect you from the meeting room. So it just leaves me to inform those present that all parties will receive a written copy of the decision notice within 5 working days. And I therefore now close the hearing. Thank you for all your attendance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.